Like, comment, and subscribe.
Long ago, in a kingdom of rivers and green hills, there lived a good king and queen. They had wealth, peace, and loyal subjects, yet one sorrow weighed upon their hearts. They had no child. For many years the queen prayed in the royal chapel, wishing for a little one. The king too would gaze at the stars, hoping that fate might bless them with an heir. Time passed, seasons changed, and still the palace nursery was empty. At last, when hope seemed faint, the queen discovered she was expecting a child. The news spread quickly across the land. Bells rang in every village, farmers brought offerings of grain, bakers made crown-shaped cakes, and children danced in the streets. The king declared that no corner of the kingdom would go without rejoicing. When the queen finally gave birth, a beautiful baby girl was placed in her arms. Her cheeks were soft as rose petals, her tiny eyes shone like starlight, and her smile carried warmth into every heart. They named her Aurora, for she was as radiant as the dawn. The king and queen wept with joy, saying, "She shall be the light of our kingdom." To honor the princess, the king announced a grand feast. Nobles, knights, and villagers were invited. But most importantly, so were the fairies of the land. In those days, fairies were respected as givers of blessings, and their gifts shaped the future of a child. The king had 12 golden plates for 12 fairy godmothers, and so 12 were invited to the banquet. The day of the celebration was splendid. The castle was hung with silk banners of blue and gold, candles glowed like stars, and music filled the great hall. Guests marveled at the little princess in her cradle, dressed in white silk. One by one, the fairies approached to give their blessings. The first touched her hand and said, "I give you beauty, fairer than the roses of spring." The second blessed her with wisdom, the tea, heard with kindness, the fourth with music, the fifth with laughter, the sixth with grace, and so on. Each gift shimmered invisibly over the child, promising a future bright with wonder. But as the 11th fairy stepped back, a sudden wind rattled the windows. The candles flickered, and the music stopped. From the dark end of the hall, a tall figure appeared, cloaked in black velvet. Her eyes were cold, her expression sharp with scorn. It was the 13th fairy, the one who had not been invited, for though she was powerful, the king had only 12 golden plates. Believing herself insulted, she had come in wrath. "So," she said, her voice like a blade, "the kingdom celebrates without me. A child is blessed, while I am forgotten." The king tried to speak. "Great fairy, it was not our wish to offend you. Only 12 plates." "Silence!" she thundered. She raised her hand toward the cradle. "This princess shall grow in beauty and grace, yes, but on the day she turns 16, she shall prick her finger on a spindle, and she shall die." The hall erupted in cries of horror. The queen clutched Aurora, the king drew his sword, though it was useless against such magic. With bitter laughter, the dark fairy vanished in smoke, leaving dread behind her. Silence fell until the last fairy, the 12th, stepped forward. She had not yet spoken her gift. Though she could not undo the curse, her magic could soften it. She touched the sleeping child gently and whispered, "Sweet princess, you shall not die. Instead, when the spindle's touch finds you, you shall fall into a deep sleep, and in that slumber you shall remain until true love's kiss awakens you." The court breathed again, though their joy was gone. The king and queen wept, grateful for mercy, but fearful of the years ahead. The feast ended in sorrow, and whispers of the curse spread across the land. Yet, In that moment, as baby Aurora slept peacefully in her cradle, no one could imagine the trials, enchantments, and long sleep that would one day shape her destiny. After the dark fairy's curse, the king wasted no time. He summoned his council and gave an order that startled the entire kingdom. Every spindle in the land must be destroyed. Messengers rode out to every town, every cottage, and every workshop. Blacksmiths, merchants, and even humble peasants who owned spinning wheels were commanded to bring them forth. The castle courtyards burned for days. Piles of spindles reduced to ash, their smoke curling into the sky as a sign of the king's determination. Though many whispered that such a command was harsh, none dared disobey. The people loved their princess and feared the curse. Mothers who once spun wool by their hearths now turned to weaving or trading. The art of spinning slowly vanished from the kingdom, leaving behind both relief and unease. The queen, meanwhile, devoted herself to raising her daughter. Aurora grew strong and graceful, with laughter like music. From her earliest years, her presence brightened the palace. Servants adored her, and guards would bow lower for her than even the king, not out of duty but affection. Her kindness was remarkable. She would comfort a crying maid, share sweets with children of the servants, and bring flowers from the garden to her mother's chambers. The king, though proud, remained watchful. Each year that passed without incident gave him hope, but the shadow of the curse never left his heart. On her birthdays, he celebrated with joy, yet his eyes always searched the halls with unease. He could not forget the dark fairy's promise, and he vowed never to allow danger near her. As Aurora grew, the blessings of the fairies became evident. She was indeed beautiful, with golden hair that shimmered in sunlight and eyes as bright as sapphires. Her wisdom shone in her questions, for even as a child she asked things beyond her years. Why do the stars move? Or, why do people fight wars? Her kindness was as natural as breathing. When a bird injured its wing in the garden, she cared for it until it flew again. Musicians marveled at her gift for song, and even the sternest knight softened when she laughed. Often she played in the gardens with the children of the court. They ran through the rose bushes, played hide-and-seek in the orchard, and wove crowns of daisies. Though she was a princess, Aurora never set herself above others. She spoke gently to all, whether noble or servant, earning loyalty that no throne alone could command. Yet unseen, in the shadows of the forests and mountains, the 13th fairy watched. She had not forgotten her curse, nor had her anger cooled. She waited patiently, knowing the day would come. Her spies, ravens with eyes like burning coal, sometimes flew over the palace, their gaze sharp upon the princess. None saw them, but the old fairy smiled, certain that destiny would bring Aurora to her fate. The good fairies, however, remained watchful as well. From time to time, they visited the castle in secret, whispering protection charms upon the doors, the staircases, and the very walls of the nursery. They could not erase the curse, but they could guard the princess as best they could. As the years passed, Aurora's name became a legend among her people. Songs were written about her, calling her the Dawn Princess, the gift of heaven, and the flower of the kingdom. Travelers who passed through the realm spoke of her kindness, spreading tales beyond the borders. Yet always there was a shadow in these stories, for everyone knew the curse hung over her like a storm cloud waiting to break. When Aurora turned 12, the king increased his guard. He forbade her to wander far from the castle and commanded his knights to watch her closely. But Aurora's spirit was free, and she often slipped into the gardens or the orchard when she could. She loved nature, the fluttering butterflies, the sparkle of morning dew, and the song of the larks. Sometimes the queen smiled at her daughter's adventurous ways, though the king frowned, fearing that curiosity could, one day, lead her to danger. Still, despite the king's fears, the castle brimmed with joy. The princess's laughter made even the hardest days light, and her presence brought peace to all around her. Yet the unseen hands of fate continued to weave their threads. The day of her 16th birthday was slowly approaching, and with it, the moment when the curse would seek its power. For now, however, Aurora's childhood was one of happiness, her days filled with love and learning. But destiny was waiting, silent and patient, for the hour when innocence would give way to enchantment. When Aurora's 16th birthday dawned, the kingdom awoke in celebration. Bells rang across the villages, and banners fluttered from every rooftop. The king and queen spared no expense, for this was a day they had long awaited. For years they had carried the shadow of the curse in their hearts, but now, with the hour at hand, many hoped the danger might somehow be avoided. The king's decree had been absolute. Not a single spindle remained in the land, or so he believed. The castle was alive with music and laughter. Nobles from distant lands brought gifts of jewels and silks, while villagers carried flowers and garlands to adorn the halls. Aurora, dressed in a gown of silver and blue, greeted them all with her usual grace. To those who bowed low, she lifted their chins with a smile. "You honor me more with your friendship than with gold," she said, winning hearts as always. Yet as the festivities filled the palace, Aurora's curiosity tugged at her. She had always been adventurous, and the excitement of the day made her restless. After greeting her guests, she slipped away from the banquet, seeking a moment of quiet. Her footsteps carried her through corridors she seldom visited, up winding staircases, past heavy doors seldom opened. The castle was vast, and though she had lived there her whole life, there were still places unknown to her. At last she came to a narrow spiral stair that climbed into a forgotten tower. Dust covered the steps, and cobwebs stretched across the corners. Still, something seemed to beckon her forward. Her heart beat quickly, but her curiosity was stronger. Step by step she ascended, until she reached a small wooden door at the top. To her surprise, it was unlocked. She pushed it open. Inside, a dim room revealed itself. The air smelled of dust and age. At its center sat an old woman, hunched over a curious device that whirred softly. She walked with focused hands, drawing wool across the spindle. Aurora tilted her head. She had never seen such a thing before. "Good day, grandmother," Aurora said kindly. "What is that tool you work with?" The woman looked up, her eyes glittering strangely in the half-light. Her voice cracked like dry wood as she answered, "It is a spindle, child, used for spinning thread. Would you like to try?" Aurora's eyes widened with wonder. She had read about such things in books, but had never touched one. The king's decree had erased them from the kingdom before she could learn of them. "May I truly?" she asked. "Of course," the old woman replied, smiling thinly. She held out the spindle. "Just a gentle touch is all it takes." Aurora reached out, her finger brushing the sharp point. In that instant, a sting like fire pricked her skin. She gasped softly, and then her body wavered. Her eyes fluttered closed, and she fell into a deep, unnatural sleep, her hand slipping from the spindle. The curse had come to pass. At that very moment, as though bound by the same spell, the entire castle sank into slumber. The king, raising a cup in the great hall, froze mid-toast as his eyes shut. The queen, watching her daughter's empty seat, collapsed into sleep upon her throne. Musicians slumped over their instruments, servants dozed where they stood, and guards dropped their spears as they leaned against the walls. In the kitchens, cooks fell asleep at their stoves, and even the horses in the stables bowed their heads and closed their eyes. Silence spread through the castle like a great wave. Only the spindle hummed softly in the lonely tower room, where the princess now lay upon the cold floor, her face peaceful as though she were only dreaming. Outside, the good fairy who had softened the curse appeared in a shimmer of light. With her staff, she touched the walls of the castle. "Let none disturb this sleep until the hour of awakening," she whispered. At her command, thorny vines began to grow, climbing over the gates, the towers, and the walls. They twisted thick and sharp, weaving a barrier that rose higher with every moment. Soon the castle was hidden behind a forest of thorns, impenetrable and fierce. Years would pass, and the vines would grow thicker still, ensuring that no careless wanderer might stumble into the sleeping court. Yet the fairy's magic carried hope, for she knew that someday a heart both brave and true would find the way. For now, though, the princess slept, the kingdom slept, and time itself seemed to hold its breath, waiting for the rest of the tale to unfold. The moment Aurora touched the spindle, time itself seemed to shudder. The curse fulfilled its promise, and the entire castle lay silent in slumber. From the highest tower to the deepest cellar, no voice stirred, no footsteps echoed. It was as though the kingdom itself had been frozen in a single breath. Outside, the fairy who had softened the curse completed her work. With a wave of her wand, vines and thorny branches sprang from the ground, twining together into an impenetrable barrier around the castle walls. They grew higher with each passing season, until the palace disappeared entirely behind a fortress of nature. The fairy looked upon her work with sorrow, but also with hope. "The world must forget this place until the one destined arrives," she whispered, and then she vanished in a shimmer of light. Seasons turned into years. Birds nested in the thorny maze, foxes crept through the undergrowth, and deer wandered cautiously along the edges. The once bustling roads to the castle fell silent, grass pushing up through the stones. Villagers in nearby towns spoke of the strange forest that grew without end, and though some dared to approach, none could find a way through. The castle of the Dawn Princess was swallowed by mystery. Rumors spread like drifting smoke. Some said a great curse lay upon the land. Others whispered that treasure beyond imagining was hidden in the thorn-covered halls. Yet the story most often told was of a princess who slept within, more beautiful than any mortal, waiting for the one who could break the spell. Minstrels sang songs of her, calling her the Rose of the Thorns, the Dreaming Dawn, the Silent Star. Brave knights and adventurers from distant lands came seeking glory. They carried swords, axes, and fire, determined to cut through the thorns and claim the prize. Yet the vines were alive, twisting and striking like serpents. Tirpongi, horns tore armor as easily as cloth. Many tried. None succeeded. Some were trapped forever, their bones hidden within the endless bramble. The forest guarded its secret fiercely, and each attempt to conquer it only added to the legend. Generations passed. Children grew up hearing the tale by their hearths, wondering if the princess was still alive. Grandparents shook their heads and said, "She sleeps still," untouched by time, for indeed within the castle nothing changed. Aurora lay upon a velvet bed, her golden hair spread like sunlight across the pillow, her face calm and serene. Around her, the king and queen slumbered on their thrones, courtiers froze mid-conversation, and servants rested in eternal pause. The kitchen smelled forever of half-baked bread, the gardens held blossoms that never wilted, and the air remained still, untouched by decay. It was a world preserved, waiting, unmoving. The curse, though cruel, was strangely merciful. Time outside the castle moved on, empires rose and fell, and generations of people lived and died. But within the walls, all remained as it had been on that fateful day. The good fairy's gift had ensured that Aurora would not wither with age, nor waste away, but rest peacefully until her destiny was fulfilled. Still, not all was silent hope. The 13th fairy, the one who had cast the curse, sometimes returned to watch her work. She would circle the thorny forest in the shape of a dark bird, her eyes glowing like embers. She smiled at the thought of princes caught in her thorns, their courage crushed by her enchantment. "Let them try," she would hiss to the night wind. "None shall pass, and she shall sleep forever." But though the dark fairy's pride was great, she could not undo the threads of fate. The good fairy's words remained stronger than she wished to believe. Somewhere, sometime, a heart pure and brave would come, and the slumber would end. Until that day, the castle remained hidden, a forgotten jewel in a sea of thorns. The villagers at its borders told the story again and again, their voices hushed as though afraid the forest itself might hear. And each retelling gave the legend new life, ensuring that even as centuries rolled onward, the tale of the sleeping princess was never lost. Thus, while Aurora dreamed in silence, the world around her shifted and changed. And yet, though kingdoms might crumble and rulers fade into dust, the enchanted sleep endured, waiting for the one destined moment when the spell would at last be broken. Though the castle lay silent and hidden behind its wall of thorns, the world outside did not forget. Stories of the sleeping princess traveled from village to village, from kingdom to kingdom, changing with each telling. Some said she was a maiden trapped in stone. Others claimed she was guarded by a dragon. But the truest version endured, that a princess lay asleep, awaiting the day a true and noble heart would awaken her. It was the good fairy, the 12th, who had softened the curse, who made sure the tale was never lost. Though she rarely appeared before mortals, she whispered into the dreams of storytellers and minstrels, planting the legend in their hearts. "Do not let them forget her," she murmured, "for one day the right one must come." Thus, songs and poems flourished, carrying Aurora's name through the centuries. Generations passed like ripples upon a river. The castle, wrapped in its wild forest, remained untouched by time. Within, Aurora and all who had fallen asleep that day still rested peacefully. Outside, kingdoms rose and fell, rulers came and went, yet the enchanted sleep endured. Among those who heard the tale, many were drawn to test their courage. Knights in shining armor, wandering princes, and even reckless mercenaries came with swords and torches. All believed they might claim glory by breaking the curse. Yet none returned. The thorns were alive, twisting to trap intruders, their spikes sharper than steel. Some claimed to hear screams echoing faintly from within, though perhaps those were only the cries of the unlucky lost in the bramble. Over time, fear grew, and many came to believe the place was not enchanted, but cursed beyond redemption. Still, the good fairy never gave up hope. She knew the curse had an end, though when and how remained hidden. She returned often, unseen, to walk the outer edge of the forest. Standing with her staff in hand, she whispered to the wind, "She shall not sleep forever." One evening, as the sun sank crimson behind the hills, the fairy spoke with the stars. "Tell me," she asked them, "is the hour near?" The stars glittered without answer, yet in her heart she felt a stirring, an assurance that destiny was weaving its threads closer. In nearby kingdoms, bards kept the story alive. They sang of a princess radiant as dawn, of a spell of endless dreams, and of a kiss of true love that alone could wake her. Mothers told the tale to their children, who listened wide-eyed, imagining the day a hero might succeed where others had failed. Some children grew into men who would attempt the journey themselves, drawn by the promise of honor. Yet the forest turned them all away, but not all heard the tale as a warning. In one distant land, a young prince listened with quiet wonder. Unlike others, he did not hear in the story a promise of riches or fame. Instead, he thought of the princess herself, the loneliness of her endless sleep, the sorrow of her people, the cruelty of a curse that stretched across centuries. His heart stirred not with ambition, but with compassion. The fairy, sensing his spirit, visited him in a dream. She appeared as a figure of light, her voice gentle as falling snow. "There is a maiden who waits beyond a forest of thorns," she told him. "Many have tried, but none have succeeded. Yet I see courage in you that others lack. If your heart is true, the path shall open." When the prince awoke, the dream lingered like morning mist. Though he could not fully understand why, he knew he must seek the hidden castle, not for treasure, not for songs of glory, but because something within him called him to her. Thus the prophecy endured. Though centuries had passed, though countless heroes had failed, hope remained alive. The world still whispered of Aurora, the princess of the dawn, sleeping in silence yet destined to wake. And somewhere, fate prepared to bring forth the one whose love would break the spell. The hour was drawing nearer, though none in the kingdoms beyond could yet see it. The threads of destiny had tightened, and the story was ready to move once more. Far from the thorn-wrapped castle, in a neighboring kingdom, there lived a young prince named Alaric. He was not the strongest of men, nor the tallest, but he carried within him something rarer than physical power, a heart steady and true. From childhood, he had listened to tales of the sleeping princess, told by traveling minstrels and old storytellers who sat by the fire. Unlike others who heard only of the glory such a quest might bring, Alaric always lingered on the thought of the girl herself, alone, silent, locked in endless dreams. One night, after hearing the tale once more from a wandering bard, Alaric dreamed of the princess. She stood before him in a garden filled with roses, her golden hair glowing like sunlight, her eyes closed as if waiting for something just beyond reach. A soft voice, not hers, but another's, whispered, "The hour has come. Go to her, for she waits for you." When he awoke, his heart burned with purpose. Though his father, the king, scoffed at the old legend, and his mother wept at the thought of losing him, Alaric could not be swayed. "This is not a quest for riches," he told them, "but for what is right. If she still sleeps, I must try." With a small band of companions, he set out toward the land of the thorns. The journey was long. They crossed rivers that shimmered like glass, trudged through forests where the shadows whispered, and climbed mountains whose peaks cut the clouds. Along the way, Alaric's companions grew weary. Some turned back, unwilling to face what lay ahead. Yet the prince pressed on, guided by a sense that his steps were not his own, but woven by fate. At last, they reached the edge of the cursed forest. The sight made even the bravest falter. Thorned vines twisted into the sky, their spikes glinting like knives, their roots thick as serpents. The air around them seemed heavy, as though the very land held its breath. Many bones lay tangled within the brambles, the remains of those who had tried before. Alaric's companions urged him to abandon the quest. "Look, my prince," one said, "the forest devours all who enter. Do not throw away your life for a dream." But Alaric only placed his hand on his sword and shook his head. "She has waited long enough." With that, he stepped forward. The thorns shifted. Where others had found only resistance, Alaric felt the vines parting before him, drawing back as though recognizing his purpose. His companions gasped in awe, but none dared follow. Alone, The prince walked deeper into the enchanted maze. The brambles closed behind him, sealing the path. The deeper he went, the quieter the world became. No birds sang, no insect stirred, no breeze touched his face. Only the whisper of leaves and the creak of branches echoed around him. Time seemed strange, minutes stretching like hours, yet Alaric pressed onward. At last, after what felt like both a day and a lifetime, he emerged into a clearing. Before him rose the forgotten castle, its towers draped in ivy, its gates wrapped in thorns thicker than oak trunks. Yet as he approached, the barrier drew aside, allowing him passage. The doors of the castle creaked open with a sigh, as if welcoming him home. Inside, silence reigned. Knights lay asleep in their armor, servants dozed where they had stood centuries before, and nobles slumped at tables still set with faded feasts. Alaric walked through the halls with reverence, his footsteps echoing softly. He climbed staircases, passed through corridors, and at last came to the chamber where the princess lay. There she was, just as the dream had shown him. Aurora rested upon a bed draped in velvet, her golden hair spread like sunlight, her face serene and untouched by time. She seemed not dead, but merely waiting, as if she had closed her eyes only moments before. Alaric's heart ached at the sight. He knelt beside her, whispering, I come, though I am not sure if I am worthy, but if fate has brought me here, let it be so. He reached for her hand, trembling slightly, and leaned closer. The moment of destiny had arrived. In the still chamber, the air seemed to pause as Prince Alaric leaned over the sleeping princess. Aurora's face glowed softly in the dim light, her golden hair spilling like sunlight across the pillow. For a long moment, he simply gazed at her, struck by the peace and beauty that time itself had not touched. She seemed more than mortal, like a star that had fallen to earth and lay waiting for its light to be rekindled. Alaric's heart trembled. He remembered the fairies' words in his dream. If your heart is true, the path shall open. The forest had parted for him. The castle had welcomed him. Surely this was the moment destiny had prepared. Bowing his head, he pressed a gentle kiss upon her lips. At once, the enchantment shattered. Aurora's eyes fluttered open, bright as dawn breaking after endless night. She drew a soft breath, as if awakening from a long dream, and her gaze met his. For a heartbeat, silence held them both, and then she spoke in a voice warm and clear. You have come for me. Around them, the castle stirred. The king and queen awoke on their thrones, bewildered but joyful. Courtiers blinked and stretched, servants rubbed their eyes, musicians shook themselves awake and grasped their instruments. In the kitchens, cooks cried out in surprise as their pots bubbled once more. Even the horses in the stables whinnied as though from a long nap. After 100 years, life had returned to the sleeping kingdom. Aurora rose gracefully, taking Alaric's hand. I dreamed of shadows and silence, she said softly. But I also dreamed of hope. You are the hope I waited for. Alaric bowed, humbled not by her beauty, but by the strength he saw in her eyes. The king and queen hurried to their daughter, tears streaming down their cheeks. They embraced her as though afraid she might vanish, overjoyed beyond words. Turning to Alaric, the king said, You have done what one other could. You have saved not only our daughter, but all of us. Word of the awakening spread swiftly, carried by wind and song. Villagers came running to see the miracle, And when they arrived at the castle gates, they found the once deadly thorns withered away, curling into the earth like fading smoke. Flowers sprang up in their place, blooming bright and fragrant, as though nature itself rejoiced. The king declared days of feasting and celebration. Banners of every color flew from the towers, and music filled the air once more. Aurora and Alaric walked among the people, their hands entwined. Everywhere they went, cheers rose. The Dawn Princess lives, and blessings upon the prince who woke her. Yet amid the celebration, Aurora remained thoughtful. She looked at the people, at the kingdom that had slept with her for so long. "It was not only I who dreamed," she said to Alaric. "All of them did. This is not just my awakening, but theirs as well. We must guide them into a new dawn." Alaric nodded. He saw in her not only a princess, but a leader born of hardship and patience. He vowed silently to stand at her side, not as a rescuer, but as a partner. Soon after, the king and queen, knowing their daughter's destiny, blessed the union of Aurora and Alaric. A grand wedding was held in the castle, attended by nobles, villagers, and even the fairies who had given their gifts so long ago. The 12th fairy appeared once more, smiling at the sight of the curse undone. "My gift was not in vain," she said. "Love has triumphed, as it always shall." As Aurora and Alaric stood together, crowned with garlands of roses, the kingdom rejoiced louder than ever before. Fireworks lit the night sky, music danced upon the air, and joy spread like golden light over the land. The dark fairy, seeing her curse broken, vanished into the shadows of the world, her pride wounded. But she could not undo what had been written. The tale of Sleeping Beauty was no longer one of sorrow, but of hope fulfilled. Aurora and Alaric ruled with wisdom and kindness, guiding their people into an age of peace. And though many years passed, songs were still sung of the princess who had slept for 100 years and of the prince whose love had awakened her. Thus, the story of Sleeping Beauty came to its rightful end, not in silence, but in celebration, in love, and in the dawning of a new and everlasting day.